Elena moved quietly between the tables, holding a tray full of coffee cups and plates. Her cafe uniform was clean but faded, and her smile always gentle. The customers came and went, laughing, chatting, never noticing the small piano sitting in the corner of the room. It was old, covered in dust, and most thought it was just decoration, but every time Elena passed by it, her eyes lingered. Just for a second longer than they should have. Once, a long time ago, that piano had been her whole world when she was younger. Elena dreamed of playing on grand stages. She had studied music, practicing until her fingers ached. She believed music could tell stories, heal hearts, and even change lives. But life had other plans when her mother fell sick. Elena sold her piano to pay for medicine. The day the piano was taken away, it felt like a piece of her soul went with it. Years passed, and the dream faded like a forgotten song. She started working odd jobs, anything to survive. The cafe job was supposed to be temporary, but months turned into years. Still, sometimes when the cafe was empty, she'd touch the keys of the dusty piano, softly pressing one note at a time. The sound was weak, but the memory was strong. Her hands remembered what her heart had tried to forget. Her co-workers liked her, but they never asked much about her life to them. She was just the quiet waitress who worked hard and never complained. She was kind, always helping others, but no one really knew the woman behind that tired smile. Every night after closing, she'd sit near the window, watch people walk past, and wonder where her life had gone. She didn't envy anyone, but sometimes she wished she had one more chance, just one, to touch the piano she once loved. The cafe was near a big music academy, and students often came in wearing stylish clothes. Carrying expensive instruments, they laughed loudly, ordered carelessly, and left generous tips that made Elena's day easier but her heart heavier. She saw in them the version of herself that could have been, a version that still played under bright lights instead of cleaning tables under dim ones. One night after everyone left, she stayed behind to close the cafe. The manager had gone home early, and the street outside was quiet. She stood near the piano, staring at it like it was an old friend. Her hands trembled as she lifted the wooden cover from the keys. Dust floated in the air as she touched them lightly. She pressed one note, then another, then three more. The soft melody filled the empty cafe, fragile but beautiful for a few moments. She forgot who she was now. She wasn't a waitress, she wasn't tired, she wasn't invisible. She was the girl who once played with all her heart. Her reflection in the cafe window looked younger, freer, almost alive. She smiled for the first time that day, a real smile. But then the doorbell rang, a sound that pulled her back into the present. A delivery boy poked his head in, asking if they were still open, embarrassed. Elena quickly stepped away from the piano. Pretending she had just been cleaning, she laughed it off, but deep down, something had stirred inside her that night. As she walked home under the flickering streetlights, her heart felt strange, half heavy, half awake. She could still feel the vibration of the keys under her fingers. The sound replayed in her mind, note by note, reminding her that her talent wasn't gone, just sleeping. She passed by the academy on her way home. Students' laughter echoed through the night, and the sound of a piano drifted from an open window. She stopped, listening. The tune was beautiful, but it lacked emotion. It sounded perfect but cold, like someone playing notes instead of feelings. And for the first time in years, Elena whispered to herself, "I could still play better than that." She smiled at her own foolishness, shaking her head. But a tiny spark had been lit inside her, one she didn't realize would soon change everything. She didn't know that fate was watching quietly, waiting for the moment to push her back toward the piano. She didn't know that soon. A cruel encounter would make her sit before those keys again, not as a servant, but as a musician reborn. For now, she was just a waitress walking home, unaware that the song of her life was about to begin again. The next morning, the cafe buzzed with chatter as sunlight poured through the windows. Elena tied her apron, ready for another long day. She moved between tables, smiling politely, but her mind was far away. Every time she walked past the old piano in the corner, she remembered the melody she had played the night before. The sound still echoed in her head, soft and haunting, reminding her of who she used to be. By noon, the cafe grew louder. It was the start of the lunch rush, and a group of wealthy students from the nearby music academy entered. They wore branded jackets, expensive watches, and carried an air of arrogance that filled the room. Their laughter was sharp, careless. They had come many times before, always leaving a mess and treating the staff like they were invisible. At the center of the group was Sophie, the daughter of a well-known millionaire. Her father owned concert halls and funded the same academy they attended. Sophie had long golden hair, designer clothes, and a smile that could melt or wound, depending on her mood. She was talented, but she loved attention more than music itself. She believed money could buy everything, even respect. When Elena came to take their order, Sophie didn't even look up. "Oh, it's her again," one of her friends whispered with a smirk. "The sad waitress who stares at the piano." Sophie giggled, stirring her drink. "Maybe she thinks she can play it," she said loud enough for Elena to hear. Elena froze for a second, her cheeks warming. She forced a smile. "What can I get you today?" she asked softly, her voice calm, hiding the sting beneath.
"We'll have 4 cappuccinos," Sophie replied lazily.
"And maybe you can bring us some music with it." The table erupted in laughter. Elena turned away, her steps steady but her heart hurt. She had spent years swallowing her pride, pretending cruel words didn't matter. But this one dug deep, deeper than she expected. She reminded herself, just a waitress. Just a job, she repeated it like a prayer. But when she reached the counter, she caught her reflection in the glass. Tired eyes, trembling lips, the face of someone who had given up too soon. A quiet regular named Mr. Harris, an elderly man who often sat by the window reading a newspaper, had seen the whole thing. He looked at her with kind eyes. "You shouldn't let them speak to you like that," he murmured. Elena smiled weakly. "It's fine," she said. "People like them don't mean what they say." Mr. Harris shook his head. "No, they meant every word. But maybe it's time someone showed them what real class looks like." Elena frowned, not understanding. "What do you mean?" she asked. The old man nodded toward the piano. "You can play, can't you?" Her breath caught. "I used to," she whispered. "A long time ago," he smiled. "Then maybe it's time you remember how." Elena laughed softly, shaking her head. "No, sir, that's not who I am anymore." But before she could walk away, Sophie's voice cut through the room. "Hey, waitress," she called loudly. "Play us something. Let's see if you can do more than wipe tables." Her friends burst into laughter again. The cafe grew silent. Everyone turned to look. The other staff froze, unsure what to do. Even the manager peeked out from the kitchen door, embarrassed. Sophie leaned back, enjoying the attention. "Go on," she said mockingly. "Show us what you've got." Elena's hands tightened around the tray. For a moment she wanted to run, just walk out. Leave everything behind. But Mr. Harris's gentle voice stopped her. "Play for yourself, not for them," he said softly. "You have nothing to prove, except to the girl you used to be." Elena stood still, her heart racing. Every instinct told her to stay silent, to keep her head down like always. But something inside her cracked open. A voice she hadn't heard in years whispered, "Enough." She walked toward the piano slowly. The cafe watched in stunned silence. The group of students smirked, waiting for her to embarrass herself. She sat down, brushing the dust from the keys. Her hands trembled. She hadn't touched a piano properly in years. Sophie leaned back, whispering, "This should be good." The first key Elena pressed was soft, hesitant, then another. The melody stumbled, uncertain. But as her fingers began to remember the rhythm, something beautiful happened. The hesitation faded and emotion took over. Every note carried a story of struggle, sacrifice, and hope. The cafe air changed. Conversation stopped. Forks rested midair. Even the students fell silent. Sophie's smirk disappeared as the music wrapped around her like a memory. Elena closed her eyes, her body swaying with each note. She wasn't in a cafe anymore. She was back on stage, under lights, where dreams still mattered. The song rose and fell like a heartbeat, raw and real. When the last note faded, the room was still, utterly still. No one spoke. Sophie stared at her, wide-eyed, like she had just seen something she couldn't explain. Elena stood up quietly, adjusted her apron, and whispered, "Enjoy your coffee." Before walking away, Mr. Harris smiled proudly. The silence in the cafe was louder than applause. Everyone knew they had just witnessed something special. But for Elena, it wasn't victory. It was awakening. For the first time in years, she remembered what it felt like to be herself. And though she didn't know it yet, that simple moment would change her life forever. The next day, the cafe felt different. The same sunlight streamed through the windows. The same aroma of coffee filled the air, but people whispered instead of laughed. The night before had changed something. Word had spread. The quiet waitress had played the piano, and everyone who heard her said it was unforgettable. Elena didn't like attention. She tried to act as if nothing had happened, cleaning tables, serving customers, smiling politely, but she could feel the stares. The regulars looked at her with quiet admiration. Even the other waitresses kept sneaking glances at her, whispering, "Did you really play?" She would just nod softly, pretending it wasn't a big deal. Mr. Harris sat by his usual window seat, sipping his tea and reading the paper. When Elena passed by, he smiled. "You did well yesterday," he said. "Not just because of the music and because you stood up for yourself." She smiled shyly. "I didn't mean to make a scene," he chuckled. "Sometimes the truth needs to be heard, even if it makes noise," but not everyone was pleased. Later that afternoon, the same group of academy students returned. Sophie walked in wearing dark sunglasses and an expensive scarf. Her friends followed, quieter than usual. They sat in the same corner booth, but this time they didn't laugh right away. When Elena came to take their order, Sophie looked up, her expression unreadable. "You played well yesterday," she said finally. The tone wasn't mocking, it was careful, uncertain. "Thank you," Elena replied softly. "Would you like your usual cappuccinos?" Sophie nodded, but her friends nudged her, whispering something. She glared at them, then turned back to Elena. "Do you teach?" she asked suddenly. Elena blinked, surprised. "Teach?" she repeated. "No, I don't, because I want to learn," Sophie interrupted. Her voice cracked slightly. "I've been playing for years, but when you played it was different. It didn't sound perfect, but it felt—" She paused, struggling to find the right word. "Real." The cafe went quiet again. People nearby pretended not to listen, but every ear was turned toward their table. Elena stood frozen, her tray shaking slightly. "I'm just a waitress," she said finally. "You have teachers, real ones," Sophie frowned. "They teach me notes, not feelings, when you played." I felt something I've never felt before. Elena didn't know how to respond. No one had ever asked her for something like that. For years she believed her music belonged to the past, something buried with her dreams, but now, this proud, spoiled girl, the same one who laughed at her, was asking for guidance. Before Elena could answer, the cafe door opened, and Sophie's father walked in, Mr. Dalton, tall, commanding, with the kind of presence that silenced a room. He was known across the city for his wealth and influence. The staff immediately straightened up. He looked around and spotted his daughter. "Sophie," he said sharply, "I've been calling you. Why aren't you at your lessons?" Sophie stood up quickly, nervous. "I came here to see her," she said, pointing at Elena. Mr. Dalton's eyes shifted to the waitress, confused. "Her?" he said. "Why?" Sophie took a deep breath. "She's the one who played last night, Dad. You should have heard her." Mr. Dalton gave a short, dismissive laugh. "You're skipping lessons to listen to a cafe worker?" The words stung Elena, but she kept silent. Sophie's face turned red. "You don't understand," she said. "She played better than anyone I've ever heard." The tension was thick. Customers watched quietly, unsure whether to pretend or stare. Mr. Dalton sighed. "Sophie, we don't have time for your nonsense. Let's go." But Sophie shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. "No, I'm not leaving. Not until she agrees to teach me." Everyone froze. Elena's heart raced. This couldn't be happening. "Sophie, please," she said softly. "I can't teach you. I don't even play anymore." Sophie shook her head stubbornly. "Then play again. Prove to him what I heard." Mr. Dalton crossed his arms, clearly annoyed. "Fine, let's see what all this fuss is about," he said coldly. Elena hesitated. Every part of her wanted to disappear. But she saw Sophie, the same arrogant girl now trembling, desperate to make her father see what she had felt. Something inside Elena stirred again, that same quiet fire from last night. She walked slowly to the piano, sat down, and closed her eyes. This time she didn't think. She let the music lead her. The song flowed like water, gentle at first, then powerful. Her fingers danced across the keys, each note filled with memory and emotion. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive when she finished. There was no sound, not even a breath. Sophie's father stood still, eyes wide, his expression softening. He had expected noise, not soul. He had heard thousands of musicians in his life, but none who made him feel something like this. After a long pause, he spoke quietly. You taught her? No, Elena said. I only reminded her what music is supposed to mean. Mr. Dalton looked at his daughter, then back at Elena for the first time. His proud tone faded. If you're willing, he said, I'll pay you double what you make here. Teach her what you just played. Elena looked at Sophie, who was watching her with teary eyes. It wasn't about money. It was about something much deeper, a broken dream being passed to someone who might still save it. And as Elena nodded slowly, she realized that maybe fate had brought Sophie into her life not to humiliate her, but to give her one last chance and to play. To teach and to believe again. Elena didn't sleep that night. She sat by the small window of her tiny apartment, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. The offer from Mr. Dalton echoed in her head. Double pay. Teaching the daughter of a millionaire for years. No one had seen her as anything more than a tired waitress. And now, suddenly, she was being asked to teach music again. Part of her wanted to refuse. It felt unreal, like a dream that could vanish if she believed in it too much. But then she remembered Sophie's trembling voice. Please teach me to play like you. That wasn't pride speaking, it was sincerity. Maybe, just maybe, this was her chance to rediscover who she really was. The next morning, Elena walked to the cafe early. The piano sat quietly in the corner, sunlight warming its wooden frame. She ran her hand over the keys, whispering, Looks like we're not done yet. Later that day, Sophie arrived with her driver, dressed differently from usual. No designer scarf, no heavy makeup. She looked nervous, almost shy. Hi, she said softly. Are we still on for the lesson? Elena smiled gently. Yes. Let's begin. They sat side by side at the piano. At first, Sophie played as she always had, perfectly in rhythm, fingers striking the right notes, but the music sounded empty. It was beautiful, yet lifeless. Elena listened quietly, then placed a hand over Sophie's. You play well, she said. But you're not feeling it, Sophie frowned. Feeling it? I'm playing what's written. Elena smiled faintly. Music isn't only about the notes, it's about what happens between them. Sophie looked confused. What do you mean? It means, Elena said softly, that you have to stop thinking and start remembering. Remembering what? Sophie asked. Something that matters to you, Elena said. A moment, a memory, someone you miss, someone you love. Something that hurts or heals. Sophie hesitated, then nodded slowly. She placed her fingers back on the keys, closed her eyes and began again. The melody started smooth but soon broke. She missed a note and sighed in frustration. I can't do this, she muttered. Elena chuckled gently. That's the first step. Stop trying to be perfect. They tried again, and this time Sophie's hands shook slightly. The sound was softer, uncertain, but there was emotion now. The kind that made the air feel heavier. Elena smiled quietly. There. That's it. Hours passed without either of them noticing. The cafe was closed to the public during lessons. But Mr. Harris had stayed behind, pretending to read. He watched the two women from his corner seat, one rediscovering her passion, the other learning what passion really meant. By the end of the day, Sophie's fingers were sore, but her eyes shone with something new. I never knew it could feel like this, she said. Elena nodded. That's music, not what's on the page, but what's inside you. Sophie looked at her with quiet admiration. How did you learn to play like that? She asked. Elena smiled sadly. Life taught me when you lose everything, sometimes music is all you have left. The next few weeks became a rhythm of their own. Every afternoon after classes, Sophie came to the cafe. They played, talked, and laughed. Sophie told her stories about her strict teachers and her lonely mansion, while Elena told her about growing up in a small apartment where dreams were too expensive. Slowly, the walls between them began to crumble. Sophie no longer saw a waitress. She saw a mentor, a friend, and Elena no longer saw a spoiled rich girl. She saw a lost child trying to find herself through sound. But not everyone approved. Rumors began to spread through the academy. Other students whispered that Sophie was wasting her time learning from a nobody. Her former piano tutor mocked her, saying she was throwing away her technique. Sophie didn't care. She would just smile and say, You've never heard real music then. One evening, after a long lesson, Sophie stayed behind. She hesitated, then asked, Can I ask you something personal? Elena nodded. Of course. Sophie looked down. Why did you stop playing? Elena stared at the piano, the question cutting deep. Because life demanded silence, she said quietly. When my mother got sick, I sold my piano. I thought I'd never touch one again. Sophie was quiet for a long moment. I'm sorry, she whispered. Elena smiled gently. Don't be, it brought me here. To this. She gestured to the piano and then to Sophie. Maybe this is how music found me again, before leaving. Sophie turned and said softly, You didn't just teach me how to play. You taught me how to feel. That night, Elena stayed in the cafe after everyone left. She played alone under the soft glow of the lights. Not for money, not for applause, but for herself. For the first time in years, she felt alive outside. The world carried on as usual, but inside that little cafe, something extraordinary was happening. A forgotten dream was slowly being reborn, not in one pair of hands, but two, and neither of them knew that this bond, built through music and honesty, was about to be tested in ways neither could imagine. Weeks turned into months, and the lessons between Elena and Sophie became something sacred. Every afternoon, the sound of the piano filled the cafe, soft and powerful, drawing curious listeners who stood quietly outside the window just to hear them play. Word spread quickly. The millionaire's daughter was being taught by a cafe waitress. Elena tried not to pay attention to the gossip, but she knew the whispers reached Mr. Dalton's world too. The city's elite didn't like things that broke their rules. They believed art belonged to the rich, not to people who served coffee and wiped tables. Yet Sophie didn't care. Every time she pressed the keys, she could feel Elena's teachings guiding her, not just in technique but in heart. But one rainy evening, everything changed. Sophie arrived at the cafe late. Her face pale, her eyes red. She rushed inside, ignoring the umbrella dripping in her hand. Elena was cleaning up but stopped immediately. Sophie? What's wrong? Sophie's voice shook. My father found out how much time I've been spending here. He's furious. He says this. All of this is over. She gestured toward the piano, her voice cracking. He says I'm embarrassing the family by learning from someone beneath us. Elena froze, her heart sinking. Sophie, I never wanted to cause trouble, she said softly. But Sophie shook her head. No, you don't understand. He doesn't just want me to stop. He's hiring a private tutor, someone famous from the academy. He's already canceled the charity recital I was supposed to perform. Elena sighed deeply, wiping her hands on her apron. Maybe he's just trying to protect you. Sophie's eyes widened. Protect me from what? From feeling something real? From becoming someone I actually want to be? The rain outside grew heavier, tapping against the cafe windows. Sophie's voice trembled. He thinks you're using me, but he doesn't see it. You're the only one who ever saw me. Not the money, not the name. Elena's chest ached. She wanted to tell her to stay strong, to fight. But she knew how powerful people like Mr. Dalton could be. Sophie, she said quietly. Sometimes love hides behind anger. Maybe your father just doesn't understand yet. Sophie shook her head fiercely. Then I'll make him understand. She looked at the piano, determination in her eyes. There's a concert at the academy next week. I'm going to perform there, Obi, and I want you to come. Elena's eyes widened. Me? Sophie nodded. Yes, as my guest. As my teacher, Elena hesitated. Sophie? Your father, he'll see, Sophie interrupted. He'll see what you taught me, and he won't be able to deny it. For a moment, Elena said nothing. The idea was risky. Mr. Dalton had influence, and the academy respected his authority. But as she looked at Sophie's trembling hands, she saw the same fire she once had. The kind that refused to die even when the world laughed at it. She nodded slowly. Then we'll make it count. The following week, the cafe turned into a practice hall. Sophie came every day, rain or shine. Her playing grew stronger, deeper. Every mistake turned into progress. Every note carried emotion. Elena pushed her hard but with kindness. Don't chase perfection, she'd say. Chase honesty. The night before the concert, they sat together by the piano in silence. Sophie looked nervous. What if I fail? She whispered. Elena smiled. Then fail beautifully, play like no one's watching, even if everyone is. The next evening, the academy's grand hall shimmered with golden lights. Rows of polished chairs filled with the city's richest families. Elena sat quietly near the back, wearing a simple dress. She felt out of place but proud. Her student was about to step onto that stage. When Sophie walked out, a murmur spread through the audience. Her father sat in the front row, Arms crossed, skeptical, she sat before the piano, her hands shaking slightly. Then she looked up and spotted Elena in the crowd. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, the noise faded. Then Sophie began to play. The melody was soft at first, uncertain. Then it grew warmer, fuller, blooming into something raw and breathtaking. The audience leaned forward, mesmerized. This wasn't the polished perfection of the Academy students. This was real emotion, honest and alive. Halfway through, tears rolled down Sophie's cheeks, but she didn't stop. Every note was a confession, of fear, of love, of gratitude. And when the final chord echoed through the hall, there was silence, deep and powerful. Then the audience rose to their feet, applauding wildly. Elena's eyes filled with tears. She had never been prouder. Sophie stood trembling, scanning the crowd. Her gaze found her father. His expression had changed. The pride he'd tried to hide now shining through. After the concert, Mr. Dalton approached his daughter quietly. His voice was softer than she had ever heard it. "You played beautifully," he said. Sophie looked at him, unsure. "Because of her," she whispered, pointing toward Elena. Mr. Dalton turned to face the waitress, the woman who had just turned his daughter into an artist. For the first time, he didn't see a servant. He saw a teacher, and in that moment, the gap between their worlds began to close. The rich man, the poor waitress, and the girl who bridged them, all bound by the one thing money could never buy. The truth inside a song. The morning after the concert, the world seemed brighter for both Sophie and Elena. The newspapers were full of glowing reviews about the performance. "Millionaire's daughter moves audience to tears with untrained mentor's guidance," one headline read. Elena read it once, then twice, hardly believing her name was mentioned at all. When she arrived at the cafe, the regulars clapped for her. Mr. Harris grinned proudly from his usual spot. "You did it, Miss Elena," he said. "You brought music back to this city." She smiled shyly. "It wasn't me, it was her. But in her heart, she knew it was something more. Something shared between two souls who had found each other through music. That afternoon, Sophie burst through the door, still glowing from the night before. She ran straight to Elena and hugged her. "We did it," she laughed. "They all loved it. Even my father cried." Elena chuckled softly. "I saw him," she said. "He looked very proud." Sophie nodded, her voice softening. "He told me I reminded him of my mother. He said she used to play like that, with feeling, not with fame." Elena's eyes softened. "Maybe that's why he was so afraid," she whispered. "He didn't want to lose you to the same dream." Sophie sat beside her. "He wants to meet you properly." "He said he owes you something." Elena froze. "Sophie, that's not necessary." "It is," Sophie insisted. "He wants to thank you, and I think he wants to offer you something." That evening, Sophie's driver came to pick her up. The mansion was breathtaking. Marble floors, glittering chandeliers, and walls lined with paintings worth more than Elena could ever imagine. She felt small in her simple dress, but Sophie walked beside her proudly. "Don't be nervous," she whispered. "He's not as scary as he looks." Mr. Dalton was waiting in his study. His tone was different this time. "Warm, respectful, Miss Elena," he said, extending his hand. "I owe you an apology." Elena blinked, surprised. "For what?" "For judging you," he replied. "I thought talent was something that could be bought, trained, or measured. But what you've taught my daughter, that comes from somewhere deeper." Elena smiled modestly. "I only helped her find what was already inside her." Mr. Dalton nodded thoughtfully. "Even so, you've done what no professional could. I'd like to make it official. Would you consider joining the Academy as a guest instructor?" The words hit her like thunder. "The Academy?" she repeated. "Me?" He nodded. "You'd be paid well, and you'd have a piano of your own again." Elena felt her throat tighten. For years she'd dreamed of teaching music, of sharing her heart with others, but she never imagined the chance would come like this. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. Mr. Dalton smiled. "Say yes." She looked at Sophie, whose eyes were shining with excitement. "You should do it," Sophie urged. "You deserve this." Elena took a deep breath. "All right," she said softly. "I'll do it." The following weeks felt like a miracle. Elena stepped into the academy for the first time as a teacher, not as an outsider. The same students who once mocked her now greeted her with respect, some out of guilt, others out of admiration. The first day she stood before the class, she felt her heart pounding. "I'm not here to teach you perfection," she said. I'm here to teach you truth. Music without heart is just sound. Her lessons became legendary. Students who struggled for years suddenly played with passion. The academy hallways buzzed with excitement. The waitress teacher, as they called her, was transforming everyone she taught. Meanwhile, Sophie continued her lessons privately. But their bond had changed. She no longer came as a student, but as a friend. They'd sit together after class, drinking tea, talking about dreams. Sometimes they'd play duets late into the night, laughing when they made mistakes, but success didn't come without envy. Some of the old instructors whispered behind her back. She doesn't even have a degree, one sneered. She teaches emotions, not theory, another said. Mr. Dalton heard the complaints, but he ignored them. She has something you can't teach, he told them, and my daughter is proof of that. One afternoon, Sophie arrived with a special gift. It was a small wooden box, beautifully carved. Open it, she said, smiling. Inside was a gold key and a letter. The key to the cafe piano, Sophie said. Father had it restored. It's yours now. He said it belongs to the person who made it sing again. Elena's eyes filled with tears. You didn't have to. Yes, we did, Sophie interrupted. Because you gave me back more than music. You gave me courage. You gave my father peace. And you gave yourself a second chance. Elena hugged her tightly. Overwhelmed, the cafe piano, her old friend, was waiting. Repaired and reborn just like her that evening. She walked back to the cafe alone, unlocked the door and stepped inside. The piano gleamed under the warm light. She sat down, touched the keys and whispered, "We're home." The first note she played was soft and trembling, but as the sound grew, so did her smile. Outside, people paused on the street, listening to the familiar melody that had once silenced laughter and awakened hearts. Elena didn't know it yet, but her story was no longer just hers. It had become a song that lived in others too, a melody of redemption, kindness, and hope. One that would never stop playing. Autumn arrived quietly, painting the city in gold and orange. The cafe where it had all begun was busier than ever, but something new filled the air. The sound of laughter, warmth and soft piano notes drifting through the open windows. Elena now played there every weekend. Not for tips or attention, but for joy. People would come just to listen, sipping coffee in silence as her music told stories words never could. She had become a name people whispered with admiration. The waitress who taught the millionaire's daughter. Yet Elena stayed humble, still living in her small apartment, still wearing the same warm smile. What had changed was inside her. She no longer carried shame, only peace. Sophie visited often, sometimes alone, sometimes with her father. Each visit brought something new, laughter, music or quiet reflection. One evening, as the rain tapped softly against the cafe windows, Sophie arrived with a wrapped package in her hands. "You've been playing on the same piano for years," she said, placing it on the table. "Open it." Inside was a framed photograph. Sophie and Elena together on stage at the academy, both smiling under the lights. Below it, engraved in brass, were the words, "To the woman who turned silence into song." Elena's eyes welled up. "You didn't have to," she whispered. Sophie shook her head. "You taught me more than any academy ever could. You showed me that music doesn't come from wealth or fame, but from the courage to feel." They sat down, sipping tea, the cafe nearly empty. The night was peaceful until a group of academy students entered. They were younger, excited, full of questions. "Are you Miss Elena?" one of them asked. "Our teacher said you're the reason the academy changed its music program." Elena smiled. "I just reminded them what music is," she said kindly. The students asked if she'd play something. Sophie grinned. "You should," she whispered. "For them?" Elena hesitated, then sat at the piano. The students gathered close. The first note she played shimmered through the cafe like a breath of wind. The melody was gentle but strong, full of gratitude, life, and memory. Sophie joined her, playing softly beside her. Their duet flowed like two hearts speaking the same language. When they finished, the cafe erupted in applause. The students clapped and cheered, one of them whispering, "That was better than any concert we've been to." Elena laughed quietly. "It's better because it's real," she said. Later that night, after everyone left, Sophie stayed behind to help close up. "You've changed so much," Elena said with a smile. Sophie chuckled. "You too." Then her face grew thoughtful. "You know, Dad wants to organize a scholarship for students who can't afford music school." Elena looked up, Surprised? That's wonderful. He wants to name it after you, Sophie added. Elena froze. After me? Yes, Sophie said, her eyes shining. The Elena Foundation, for students who play with heart. Elena felt her throat tighten. Sophie, that's too much, she whispered. Sophie shook her head. It's not enough. In that quiet moment, Elena realized something she never thought possible. Her pain, her losses, every struggle she endured had led here, to a life that wasn't about fame or money, but legacy. The following week, the foundation was announced. The news spread quickly, an emotional story of a humble woman who once scrubbed tables and now helped others reach their dreams. The Academy invited Elena to speak at the ceremony. When she stood on stage, her hands shook slightly, but her voice was steady. I used to think my dream had died, she said. But dreams don't die. They wait. They wait for the moment we're brave enough to try again. The audience rose to their feet in applause. Among them, Sophie and Mr. Dalton watched with pride. The man who once looked down on her now clapped with tears in his eyes. He had learned, just like his daughter, that greatness doesn't wear wealth. It wears humility. That night, the city buzzed with her story. People who once mocked her now admired her. The cafe where it all began became a quiet landmark. The Cafe of the Song, they called it after the ceremony. Elena returned to her piano one last time that night. The lights dimmed, and she began to play the same melody that had started it all, the one that silenced the laughter months ago. Sophie stood nearby, eyes closed, listening. When the final note faded, Elena whispered, That's where it all began. Sophie smiled softly. No, she said. That's where it all was reborn. They hugged tightly, tears of joy and memory in their eyes. The cafe lights glowed softly around them, and the old piano, once forgotten, gleamed like gold under the night sky. Elena looked out the window, watching the streetlights blur in the drizzle. For the first time in her life, she felt whole. Her music had not only changed others, it had healed her too. And as the world moved outside, the sound of her piano drifted through the rain, gentle, endless, and eternal. A reminder that even the quietest hearts can create the loudest legacies. Winter arrived softly, snow blanketing the streets outside the cafe where Elena's story had begun. Inside, the air was warm, the fire crackling, and the piano glowed softly under the golden lights. People still came just to listen. Workers on their way home. Students with notebooks. Old couples holding hands. They didn't come for perfection, they came for feeling, for peace. For the sound of a soul that had learned to sing again. It had been almost a year since Sophie's unforgettable concert and the launch of the Elena Foundation. The program had already helped dozens of young musicians from poor families. They came from villages, small towns, and broken homes, carrying nothing but hope and a dream. Elena taught them all with patience and heart. Play what you feel, she always said. Not what people expect. One snowy afternoon, she sat with Sophie at the cafe window, watching the snowflakes melt on the glass. Do you ever miss your old life? Sophie asked softly. Elena smiled. No. I think I finally have the life I was meant for. Sophie nodded. You know, the foundation board wants to host a winter concert. A tribute to you and your students, Elena laughed gently. A tribute to me? I think it should be a celebration of them. Sophie shook her head. No, it should be both. You started it all. Remember that night you played here, when I was foolish and cruel? That moment changed everything. Elena looked at her with warmth. Sometimes life needs one cruel moment to awaken kindness. When the night of the winter concert arrived, the Academy's grand hall was transformed into a wonderland. Snow shimmered outside the tall windows. Candles flickered on every table. The hall was full. Musicians, families, reporters, and the city's most respected figures. Mr. Dalton sat proudly beside his daughter, and Elena stood backstage, surrounded by her students. Some were nervous, others excited. Elena placed her hands on their shoulders. You've already succeeded, she said, because you're here, because you never gave up. As the concert began, the youngest student, a shy boy named Luca, stepped onto the stage first. His small hands trembled on the keys, but the moment he started playing, the music bloomed, tender and pure. The crowd leaned in, listening, moved by the emotion in every note. One by one, each student took the stage. Each performance told a story and of struggle, hope, loss, and courage. And when Sophie joined them for a duet, The audience rose to their feet before she even finished. The emotion was too strong to contain. Then the lights dimmed and the announcer spoke. Our final performer tonight, the woman who reminded us all that music is not about privilege, but about heart, Miss Elena. The crowd erupted in applause. Elena stepped onto the stage slowly, her heart pounding. She hadn't performed in front of such a large audience in years. For a moment she froze, staring at the grand piano under the spotlight. Her reflection shimmered in its polished surface. Older, wiser but alive. She took a deep breath, sat down and closed her eyes, then she began to play. The melody started soft, the same one she had played years ago in that small cafe. But it was different now, fuller, deeper, layered with everything she had lived through. Each note carried a memory, her mother's laughter, the sound of rain outside the cafe, Sophie's trembling voice asking, "Please teach me to play like you." The hall fell silent. Some cried quietly, others smiled. When she reached the final note, she let it linger in the air, then fade into silence. The crowd rose, thunderous applause filling the room. Sophie ran onto the stage, hugging her tightly. "You did it," she whispered. Elena laughed through tears. "No, we did it." Mr. Dalton joined them, his voice soft and full of pride. "You've done more than teach music, Miss Elena. You've built something eternal." Elena looked out at the audience and faces glowing with joy and gratitude, and felt something she hadn't felt in years, absolute contentment. She realized then that her dream hadn't been stolen from her long ago. It had simply been waiting for her to find the courage to share it. After the concert, the Academy unveiled a surprise. A grand piano stood on the stage, engraved in gold letters. "The Elena Piano, for those who play with heart." The crowd cheered. Elena covered her mouth, speechless. Tears streamed down her face. Sophie whispered, "Now every student who plays here will know your story." Elena reached out and touched the golden letters. "Then let them remember this," she said softly, "that no dream is ever too small to matter, and no heart too ordinary to inspire." As the lights dimmed and the snow fell outside, Elena sat once more at the piano and began to play one last melody. Not for fame, not for applause, but as a farewell to her past and a promise to the future. The sound floated out of the hall into the winter night. Blending with the whispering snow, it carried across the city, through windows, over rooftops, into the hearts of those who needed hope. And long after the last note faded, people still said that if you walked past that cafe on a quiet winter night, you could still hear her song, the song of the waitress who once walked away, but came back to teach the world how to listen again.